It is 668 BC. The greatest athletes in the ancient world are lined up for the 200-meter sprint. One of them, a Spartan named Charmis, has not eaten a real meal since yesterday evening. His pre-race nutrition consists of a handful of dried figs. By every standard modern sports science holds sacred, what happens next should be impossible. The signal drops, and Charmis of Sparta wins the Olympic sprint of 668 BC. Not just wins, but wins on a diet that would make a modern sports nutritionist physically uncomfortable. This was not an accident, and it was not unique to Charmis. The greatest athletes ancient Greece ever produced, the ones whose physiques we still carve into marble and display in museums, the bodies that modern bodybuilders study and try to replicate, ate twice a day, fasted for 12 or more hours at a stretch, and trained on foods most modern gym goers would not touch before a workout. And here is what nobody in the supplement industry wants to say out loud. They did not just perform on that diet, they built the leanest, most muscular physiques in the history of Western civilization while doing it, without losing a single pound of muscle they had earned. So the question is not whether this worked. The marble proves it worked. The question is why, and the answer cuts directly against everything you have been told about the relationship between fasting, food, and muscle, and contains something genuinely useful for anyone who has ever wondered why their body refuses to get lean without getting smaller at the same time. Stay with this, because the answer starts somewhere most people would never think to look. It starts with a handful of dried figs. That is the entire pre-race meal of the man who just won the most prestigious athletic competition in the ancient world. Not a calculated nutrition strategy, not a modern performance protocol dressed up in ancient clothing. Just figs, eaten the morning of the race after a night of fasting. And when historians first found this recorded, they did what most people do when evidence contradicts what they believe. They ignored it. For decades, the Greek athletic diet was treated as a footnote, primitive, uninformed, the kind of thing you mention once and move past quickly because it did not fit. But then more records surfaced, and more, and a pattern emerged that was impossible to explain away. It turns out Charmis was not the exception. He was the standard. Around 600 BC, the Greeks formalized something called anankophagia, a required dietary system for all Olympic athletes. The guidelines were not written by cooks. They were written by trainers who had studied medicine. Herodotus of Megara, one of the first athletic trainers ever documented by name, was the teacher of Hippocrates himself, the man who became the father of Western medicine. These were not guesses. These were the most scientifically informed minds in the ancient world. And what they prescribed was simplicity, restraint, and strategic fasting. Diogenes Laertius documented that the earliest Greek athletes lived on 3 things: dried figs, moist cheese, and wheat. Epictetus recorded what Olympic victors were specifically advised, and the list of what they were told to avoid is more revealing than what they were told to eat. No sweets, wine only sparingly, meals at intervals, never constantly. The training system built around this was called the tetrad, a 4-day cycle documented by Philostratos. Day 1, maximum intensity. Day 2, moderate effort. Day 3, full rest. Day 4, preparation. Built into every rotation were long fasting windows, overnight, sometimes longer, where the body was given no food and asked to repair itself without interference. Milo of Croton trained on this system for decades. He won the wrestling event at 6 consecutive Olympic Games, a record that no athlete in any combat sport has matched since. His physique was so extraordinary that ancient writers stopped using athletic language to describe it and started using architectural language. He reportedly carried a 4-year-old bull around the Olympic Stadium on his shoulders, then ate it the same day. These men were not surviving their diet, they were thriving on it. But here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. The modern fitness industry has spent 50 years telling you the exact opposite of what these men were doing, and collecting a great deal of money for it. So before we talk about what was happening inside the Greek body, we need to look at what the modern version of that advice actually produced, and why it has never quite delivered what it promised. Walk into any gym and you will hear the same fear stated in a dozen different ways. Fast and you'll lose muscle. Skip a meal and your body enters starvation mode. Let more than 4 hours pass without protein and the tissue you've worked for starts to disappear. It sounds scientific. It feels logical. And for decades it was treated as settled. The Greeks would have called it madness. Here is what the research now actually says when you read it carefully, rather than when the supplement industry summarizes it for you. A systematic review published in the journal Nutrients examined 8 controlled human studies on intermittent fasting combined with resistance training. The conclusion, in plain language: fat mass decreased significantly. Lean body mass, muscle, was preserved, not roughly preserved, statistically preserved. In the same study pool, one trial found participants lost fat and gained muscle simultaneously, the body doing exactly what the Greeks built their entire training philosophy around. It was not a discovery. It was a confirmation. So, the industry was wrong. The Greeks were right. But that still leaves the question that the research alone cannot answer. Knowing that fasting preserves muscle is not the same as understanding why. And the why matters, because once you understand the mechanism, you stop fearing hunger. You stop treating an empty stomach as a crisis. You start using it the way Charmis did. The answer is happening right now inside your body, and it begins the moment you stop eating. When you eat constantly, insulin stays elevated. Elevated insulin locks energy inside fat cells, making it unavailable, and keeps the body in a state of continuous processing rather than repair. Your metabolism becomes dependent on external fuel arriving on schedule. The moment it does not, performance collapses, not because the body has run out of energy, but because it has forgotten how to reach the energy it stored. When you fast, everything inverts. Insulin drops. The body begins pulling stored fat for fuel. Growth hormone, the hormone most directly responsible for preserving muscle tissue during periods of low caloric intake, spikes. In the fasted state, growth hormone actively guards lean mass from breakdown, while simultaneously sending fatty acids into the bloodstream as available fuel. The muscle is protected. The fat is finally accessible. Over time, with repeated fasting cycles, the body learns to switch between glucose and fat as fuel sources efficiently. This is called metabolic flexibility, and it is precisely what allowed a Spartan athlete to sprint at full capacity on dried figs. His body was not running low. It had simply learned to reach what it had stored, rather than waiting for what had not arrived yet. And then something else activates. Something that earned a Nobel Prize when scientists finally understood it fully. Autophagy. Your cells begin breaking down and recycling damaged components, clearing waste, repairing what is compromised, rebuilding what has been used. Cellular housekeeping that only runs when digestion is not consuming the body's attention. A study published in Cell Metabolism found that subjects who ate the same total calories within time-restricted windows lost fat and gained muscle simultaneously. Not because they ate differently, but because their eating pattern finally allowed the body's repair systems to run uninterrupted. There is one further mechanism worth naming. During extended fasting, the liver begins producing ketones, molecules the brain uses as an alternative to glucose. Research links ketone availability to increases in brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that strengthens neural connections and sharpens cognitive function. The Greeks who trained fasted were not just building better bodies, they were running clearer minds at the same time. This is the biology. The supplement industry never told you about. None of it requires purchasing anything. But understanding the biology is only half of it. The Greeks were not operating on research. They did not have the studies. What they had was something harder to quantify, and in some ways more powerful than any mechanism science has since identified. It is the peace that most modern men, even those who know the science, still have not found. There was a philosopher named Epictetus who understood that the body built in a Greek gymnasium was never the real achievement. Epictetus was born a slave in the 1st century AD. He became one of the most influential Stoic thinkers in history, and he wrote something about athletic discipline that modern fitness content skips entirely. If you want the results, you must first accept the constraints. The athlete who avoids sweets, takes wine sparingly, and submits to the schedule. That athlete has already won something before competition begins. He has won the internal argument, the one between impulse and intention. This is the layer that cannot be sold. You cannot buy discipline in a supplement store. But the Greeks understood that the body's response to training is downstream of the mind's relationship to discomfort. The metabolic flexibility that fasting builds is not just physiological, it is psychological. When you train your body to perform without food for 14 hours, you are not just teaching your metabolism. You are proving something to yourself that no pre-workout ever could. That hunger is not an emergency. That performance does not depend on perfect conditions. Epictetus wrote that Olympic victors were built not by talent, but by what they were willing to give up. The desserts avoided, the late meals refused, the comfort foregone. The Greeks were not accidentally lean. They chose it, every single day. And that choice, made consistently over years, produced something that all the protein shakes and eating windows and macro tracking in the modern world has spent decades trying to reverse engineer. You do not need to reverse engineer it. You just need to apply it. And it is simpler than anything the fitness industry has ever sold you. You do not need to train for the ancient Olympics, but the biology is identical to what it was in 668 BC, and the principles apply without modification. Compress your eating into a 10 to 12-hour window, not because fasting is fashionable, but because it gives growth hormone the space to protect your lean mass, and autophagy the space to clear what does not belong. Your body already knows how to do this. It has known for thousands of years. It simply needs the conditions. Eat enough protein during that window, around 1 gram per pound of body weight. Spread across your meals, and time your largest, most protein-dense meal immediately after your hardest training session. That is the window when muscle fibers are most primed to absorb and use what you give them. The Greeks ate after they trained, not before. The sequence is not accidental. Train with compound movements that give your muscles an unmistakable reason to stay. Follow the logic of the tetrad. Maximum effort, followed by moderate work, followed by genuine recovery. The recovery is not wasted time. It is when everything the fasting window protected and the training window stimulated actually gets built. The body does not need constant supply to stay lean and muscular. It needs the right stimulus, the right fuel at the right time, and the discipline to stop treating hunger as a problem to be solved before anything productive can happen. Charmis understood this. Milo understood this. Every athlete who stood on the starting line at Olympia and performed at the absolute limit of human capability understood this, not through research, but through the simple, repeated experience of demanding more from their body than their comfort allowed. The marble did not lie then. The research does not lie now. The only thing standing between you and the same result is the same thing that stood between every Greek athlete and failure: the willingness to be a little hungry, and the understanding that hunger is not the enemy. It never was. If this is the kind of forgotten knowledge you come here for, please consider subscribing. There is far more where this came from, and most of it has been sitting in plain sight for 2,000 years.